Chris. Thanks for your time. Let's start with a recognition of Palestine. The government clearly believes it's, with the momentum internationally now with the UK, Canada and others joining Australia in doing this. But fascinating story there from Cam Redden, where the Israelis are, gloves are off diplomatically. They're intervening in our political system as well, saying to Susan Lee, thank you for your solidarity, thank you for your support.
Well, it wouldn't surprise anyone, Kieran, to know that the Israelis play hardball. And as they said to us when we were on a trip there many, many years ago, here no one respects anybody who is weak. And don't forget that what's happening at the UN at the moment, particularly with the governments of the UK, Australia, of Canada and France, that's playing to a domestic political audience. And in Australia, it's a very narrow one. In fact, it's inside the ranks of the Labor Party caucus, and the membership of the Labor Party would revolt if Anthony Albanese had not taken this step. We know that it will do nothing on the ground in Palestine. The circumstances which the government wants in order to recognise the state of Palestine are not going to be achieved. If there were elections in Palestine tomorrow, who knows if the PA would be in charge. So it doesn't really change any of the facts on the ground there. And we know that Hamas has seen this as a victory because it's claimed it as a victory. Hamas did not care when it launched that action on October 7 whether or not every single person in Gaza died. They were happy to have that as long as they discredited the state of Israel, and they have been remarkably successful on that front. What we now need to know is what victory looks like for Benjamin Netanyahu, and he will address the United Nations later this week. And I fear, Kieran, about what Israel might do next. You can support the state of Israel without supporting everything that it does. And what if Benjamin Netanyahu thinks that the next target is the West Bank?
Indeed, yep. And then others like Albanese, Starmer, Carney and so would probably feel vindicated by their move in doing what they've done to try and influence Israel, if that were to be the behaviour out of Tel Aviv off the back of this, Chris.
Yeah, well, what matters now is what the President of the United States says tonight and what Benjamin Netanyahu says later this week as to what happens on the ground in Gaza. And look, it is an absolute tragedy, but let's not forget where it began. And it began with that attack on October 7. And today, can I say, Kieran, that I walked past the Great Synagogue in Sydney and there are security guards and police out the front of it as they begin a religious ceremony. So the real effect on the ground in Australia has been the division of this community.
I want to turn our attention to the Trump meeting, or the lack of one. You've covered, you and I have done it together on many occasions, state visits to the White House and so on, and you look at the way this is happening and the PM's not even being afforded 15 minutes, Chris.
Well, Donald Trump is clearly sending Anthony Albanese a message, and I can guarantee you I know where that message begins, that is during the Australian election campaign, the Australian then opposition leader, now Prime Minister, decided to weaponise Donald Trump against Peter Dutton, essentially calling him the Trump down under. And then in his curtain speech, not that long ago this year, he essentially was talking about one real problem in the world, and that was the United States under Donald Trump. Now, he was dog whistling that, but they certainly got the message in the White House. Now, I think there is obviously fault on all sides here. Donald Trump is completely mercurial and very small-minded when it comes to these things, but that's the president that you're dealing with. And can I say the state of Palestine is a minor order issue for the state of Australia. Our concern is what's happening in the South China Sea. Our defence depends on the United States. We are defiant in word when it comes to the United States, but we are dependent indeed, particularly in the next couple of years, on greater numbers of American troops and ships being stationed here. So it wouldn't have been a very wise idea to try and provoke the United States of America, particularly under a mercurial president. So I think that although there's fault on both sides, the Australian government should consider what it did and what its primary purpose is. Its primary purpose is the defence of Australia. It should be turning all of its attention to that, and meeting with the American president, no matter how distasteful they might find that, is something that's important to our country.
Yeah, indeed. So you've got the national security question there. Parallel to that, it's not linked in any way, but you see these remarks made alongside RFK Jr. on vaccines and paracetamol, autism, these links that Donald Trump's making today. And the way Australians might look at that and consider the president, the lack of respect that many would have for him. So in a political sense versus the defence and strategic importance, there's that interesting, I wouldn't say balance, but consideration, Chris.
Yeah, Kieran, and I actually think when they're playing the domestic politics, they're quite right on this. I don't think Susan Lee's intervention is going to have any effect whatsoever. I don't think that the Australian public will think that that's necessarily a good thing. I think that people would like to see a Team Australia approach on some of this kind of stuff. The opposition is a bit player, and I'm sure that the people inside Anthony Albanese's office are thinking that domestically, most Australians are very disturbed by Donald Trump. I am disturbed by Donald Trump and the things that he does and says, most importantly because what it means for our long-standing relationship, because no matter whether we like it or not, we are deeply integrated into the US when it comes to our own defence. So yes, I think that there may well be a domestic political payoff for Anthony Albanese in seeking to distance himself from Donald Trump, but it comes at a price, and that price is we need to now consider how we go about defending ourselves. And look, if this is the direction of travel of the Australian government, the answer is quite simple. It is that we need to double or triple our own defence spending and make sure that we can look after ourselves and that we're resilient enough and have enough fuel supplies on board in Australia to defend ourselves should push come to shove between the great powers.
Finally, I want to get your thoughts. It's been a few days now, and obviously the climate targets, the 2035 targets, repudiated by Susan Lee. It does set up another election, another electoral cycle where this is a key battle line, Chris.
Yeah, and the coalition won't have anything much to say about this, and it seems that when they do talk about this, they stumble over their own feet because they can't make up their mind where they stand. Let me say this will not be a battle over politics in the end, Kieran. This will be a battle with physics that the Labor government has now set up. And can I say, if the price of electricity continues to rise, as it will once the subsidies disappear and people are exposed to that, if the electricity system becomes more fragile, if industries go offshore because of the decisions that this government has made, then it becomes a very big issue for the Albanese government at the next election. They might feel like things are good now, but let's wait and see. And can I say that what we've seen in the last week through all the agencies of government is the institutional betrayal of the Australian people through a whole set of modelling on which, as soon as you start to look at it, the basis of it completely evaporates. There's one from the Australian Energy Market Operator which talks about $1,000 saving per year for Australians in the next few years. Only, Kieran, if you completely exclude the fact that you'd have to spend tens of thousands of dollars on the electrification of your household, essentially of making your own electricity. And on the same page, it says that electricity prices could go up by $100. And it does underline the fact in that same modelling that we're going to see two classes of citizens, the energy rich and the energy poor. And poor people who don't have solar panels, who don't have electric vehicles, who can't afford batteries, their electricity prices are undoubtedly going to rise. So what we're seeing is the betrayal of the poor by the elites of Australia, and that may come with electoral consequences.
Chris Uhlmann, thank you as always. Look forward to seeing you next week.